Hey guys, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to be doing an October wrap-up video, and I'm just going to be telling you guys what I read in October, what I thought of the books, and so forth. So I read a total of 16 books in October, and I thought that it was a lot when I read 13 books in September, but somehow I managed to read 16 this month, which is a lot. So I'm going to try to go through them very quickly because I don't want to be sitting here for like 3 hours boring you guys to death. So let's just get right into it. Also, if you're wondering why I look like this, it's because I realized I don't have any spooky videos on my channel, so I wanted to look spooky in at least one video, and today's like the last day I can do it because I'm doing an October wrap-up video, and I know Halloween was yesterday, today's November 1st, but you know what? It's fine, we're gonna be spooky. And this lipstick, it looks so bad up close, but I tried to take it off and it's like soul grafted to my skin, so I'm basically gonna be buried in it because it's not coming off ever. So let's just get right into the video. So the first book I read in October is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, and this is told through multiple perspectives, but it's mainly through Rachel's perspective. And Rachel has a lot of issues. She struggles with alcoholism and she blacks out a lot, and she rides this train every day and she sees this couple on their back porch every time she rides the train, and she kind of imagines what their relationship is like and how perfect it is and just like what their names are and everything like that, until one day she sees something that completely shatters her image of this perfect couple and their perfect house, and she finds something shocking, and so she ends up going to the police, and then she gets in way over her head into these people's lives who she doesn't even know. So I actually really enjoyed this book. This is the first thriller I've ever read, and I actually want to start reading more thrillers because I found this really interesting and I realized I like thrillers. I don't know why I've never tried them out, but I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed the slow burn plot, how it like built up over time. I really enjoyed the unreliable narrators, and I think it was just a really good time. I also really enjoyed the use of multiple narrators because it gave different perspective to the story and it made it more intimate, and I really enjoy that in a book. And it also tackles a lot of topics that are really heavy, and I think that it shows that people are normal and not, you know, completely perfect in books. And so I just really enjoyed how all the characters had like their own flaws and like their own issues that were very realistic. So I really enjoyed that about it, and overall I really liked this. I think it was like really thrilling in my opinion. I liked it a lot, and I didn't give it 5 out of 5 stars because at the end, when, you know, you find out like who did this, you know, it's like, it's almost like a Scooby-Doo confession. Like you take off the mask and it's like, oh, it's been you all along, and then they start like explaining like everything they did, and it becomes less thrilling because they explain how they did everything. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 like I said, and I will be definitely reading more thrillers in the future. So the next 2 books I read in October I actually don't have physical copies of because I checked them out from the library, so I'm just going to be inserting pictures of them. So the first book that I read in October that I checked out from the library is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I had a really good time rereading Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I used to have a copy of it growing up, but I don't know what happened to it, and it's just one of those childhood stories that stick with you because of how unique and original it is, and it's so eerie and so atmospheric and so perfect for the spooky season, and it's really enjoyable to read even as an adult. So I gave Coraline by Neil Gaiman a 3 out of 5 star rating. It was originally a 4, but the more I thought about it, I brung it down to a 3 because I honestly like the movie so much better, and it's so rare for me to like the movie better than the book, but the movie is just so much more fantastical. It has Wybie, who's one of my favorite characters, and I don't know, I just feel like the movie is way more atmospheric and way more put together and has more of a consistent, slower paced plot, whereas the book is very fast paced and it's not as fantastical as the movie. So I just kind of prefer the movie better. I don't know, I love the story of Coraline so much, and it's such a lovely nightmarish tale, and I just think that the movie was a lot better in its adaptation of this work because it's just a lot more atmospherical and fantastical, like I said, and just more colorful as a whole. So overall I gave Coraline a 3 out of 5 stars like I said, and I think it's a really good eerie read. It's very fast paced, so it's really easy to get through. It's only like 180 or so pages. So yeah, I highly recommend you read Coraline in the spooky season if you haven't already. The next book that I read and checked out from the library and don't have a physical copy of is Looking for Alaska by John Green. I wanted to read Looking for Alaska by John Green because the Hulu adaptation was coming out on October 18th, so I decided to reread it. It's been a really long time. I didn't really remember what it was about, but it is basically about a boy named Pudge, and he goes to this boarding school and he meets a bunch of new friends, and there's Alaska and the Colonel and Takumi, who are his friends that he makes, and then something tragic happens and it kind of shatters his world. And so that's the best synopsis I can really give. I know that wasn't like really the greatest, but basically just read Looking for Alaska because it's really good. So I gave Looking for Alaska by John Green 4 out of 5 stars because I really liked the way that it captured adolescence perfectly, and it also captures grief perfectly. And grief is a topic that can be done the right way or the wrong way, and it was done so well in this book. And as someone who's lost people over the years at multiple ages for multiple reasons, like, I completely understand how grief is, and it was just so perfectly accurate in Looking for Alaska. Like, it really like brought up stuff that I haven't felt in a long time, and it made me like tear up and smile in every page. Like, it was just so beautifully written, and for a debut novel, like, I think this book was great. So I really recommend you read Looking for Alaska, especially if you plan on watching the Hulu adaptation. I think you should definitely read the book first. Oh my gosh, it was so good, and I still think about Looking for Alaska to this day, even though I read it like over a month ago. Like, I think about it every day, honestly, because the book is just so good. So next in October, I reread the entire Percy Jackson series. So something this month kind of just compelled me to reread the entire Percy Jackson series, and I don't know, I just had it sitting around, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna dip right back into it. And this is weirdly good for the fall season, and I highly recommend you reread this during the fall season because, man, this was so fun to read. I slightly finished the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series, and I'm waiting until the 5th book comes out in January, and I kind of wanted a new fun series to sink my teeth into that was just easy and light and fun, and so I decided to read the entire Percy Jackson series again. I think I'm going to do a separate video on my thoughts of the series as a whole, because this is an entire series and we would be here for hours if I was telling you the intricacies of every book. So I'm going to do like one general video for like my opinions on this, but I'm going to go through them really quickly and tell you my ratings of them. The Lightning Thief, 4 stars. The Sea of Monsters, 3 stars. The Titan's Curse, 4 stars. The Battle of the Labyrinth, 4 stars. The Last Olympian, 4.5 stars. So overall, rereading the Percy Jackson series was so much fun, and I just had so much nostalgia while reading it. So yeah, I highly recommend you reread this, especially in the fall season, because this was so much fun and so easy and light and great friendship and fun adventures. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed the series, and I think that if you haven't read this or you haven't read it in a long time, reread it because it's so fun and I loved it. So the next 5 books I'm going to mention in this video I actually read for a reading challenge called Spookathon. So if you haven't watched my Spookathon vlog where I talk about all these books and you can watch me like read them and make commentary about it, you can watch my vlog, which I will link in the description down below. But anyways, the first book I read for Spookathon is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. I'm not good at pronouncing names at all. But this basically follows the story of 2 sisters in Nigeria, and their names are Ayoola and Corid. And Ayoola kind of has a bad habit of murdering her boyfriends, and Corid kind of helps her clean up the murders. And when Ayoola kind of sinks her teeth into Corid's longtime crush slash co-worker, Corid kind of gets afraid that Ayoola is going to do something to him or hurt him, and it kind of follows the story from there. So overall, I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars, and I liked that it had a lot of really funny deadpan humor. I really enjoyed the fast pace of this. The chapters are really in bite-sized pieces, and it's so easy to get through, and it's only 250 pages or less. So this book was really short and easy. And I also really enjoyed the sisterly bond and kind of the issues they deal with within their family. So I really liked that about it, but other than that, this is supposed to be a thriller, and I didn't find it thrilling at all. And there was one event in the book that could possibly be seen as like the twist, and I guessed it before it happened, so it wasn't super thrilling in my opinion. Like, I don't know, I just wasn't thrilled by this. I wasn't on the edge of my seat. I wasn't waiting to find out what happened, and it just wasn't thrilling. And I also didn't really like Ayula as a character. Like, I know that they're sisters, and so she's like, okay, I'll help her clean up the murders, but it's like, she's such a bad person. Like, why are you gonna vouch for her and just like help her cover up murders? Like, I didn't like Ayula as a character at all. Also, I think Kari deserved better. That's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, I gave My Sister the Serial Killer 2 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read for Spookathon is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and I gave this book 5 stars. And okay, I didn't even tell you the synopsis yet. Let's slow down a little bit. So basically, this is about a girl named Zaylee, and her village kind of gets stripped of its magic, and not just her village, but like the entire like little country that she lives in called Orisha, and all of the magic gets taken away by the monarchy, and so she basically goes on like this mission to get it back. And this is such a beautiful book, and this is my favorite book of 2019 and of all time. This book had me crying. I cried 7 times during this because it is just so beautifully written, and I only have one tab in here because there was only like one like small quote that I could quote, but man, if I was to quote this whole book, there would be so many tabs because this whole book was just written beautifully. Tomi Adeyemi is so good at characterization. Like, I was in love with all of the characters, including the antagonists. Like, I was here for them, and I don't know how she did that. I don't know how Tomi Adeyemi did that, but I loved all the characters in this book, and the plot is just so interesting, and the magic system is great, and I just loved this so much, and I can't wait for the sequel to come out in December. I'm so excited. I'm gonna pre-order it as soon as I can because I want it. I want to know what happens. So I highly recommend this book, and I know like I don't really read high fantasy ever, but like I feel like this is like my gateway drug into reading fantasy because this was so damn good, and I think that everybody should read this. So if you haven't read this, please read this. This is my favorite book of 2019 and of all time, so please read it. I'm honestly probably going to make an entire video talking about how much I love this book because it is so good, and I could probably talk about it for like 3 hours. So I'm probably gonna make an entire whole video where I talk about Children of Blood and Bone. But anyways, 5 out of 5 stars. 5 out of 5. So the next book I read / didn't read for Spookathon is Roald Dahl's Book of Ghost Stories. And this is basically just like an anthology of 14 different ghost stories, and they're all by different authors, and none of them are Roald Dahl. So Roald Dahl kind of just like put a bunch of ghost stories from different authors he liked into one book. So none of these are by Roald Dahl, but he just put the book together, so that's why it's called Roald Dahl's Book of Ghost Stories. But I DNF'd this at 40% because this was so boring, and these are like, I just didn't like them at all. They felt like those stories that like your grandpa would tell you that are like supposed to be scary but they aren't scary. And all of the stories had kind of like the same premise of, ooh, someone you know could be a ghost, and it just was not interesting. I lost interest like 2 pages in, and I just kept kind of pushing myself to finish it, and I just couldn't. So I DNF'd at 40%. I did not enjoy this. I do not recommend it, and I don't know, it's just really boring. So 1 out of 5. So the next book I read in October for Spookathon is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert, and this follows the story of an angsty girl named Alice and her mom as they're constantly traveling, constantly on the road, and constantly moving from place to place, and Alice doesn't really know why. She just knows that bad luck constantly follows them wherever they go. And so one day, Alice's grandmother mysteriously passes away on her grand estate called the Hazelwood, and Alice's grandmother was an author, and she wrote dark fairy tales about this place called the Hinterland. And then one day the Hinterland takes Alice's mother away, so Alice kind of goes on an adventure to the Hinterland to get her mother back. And she also goes to the Hazelwood, which is why it's called the Hazelwood. So she goes on this adventure with a boy named Ellery Finch, who is kind of a super fan of her grandmother's work. So basically they go on this adventure to get her mom back. I might do a separate video where I talk about this book because I just have a lot to say about it, and I'm gonna try to like condense it for the sake of this video. But I gave this 3 out of 5 stars because it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't amazing, and I'm really disappointed with it. So Basically, I really enjoyed the premise of this book, and I really enjoyed like the hinterland idea, and I really liked the little fictional, you know, stories of tales from the hinterland that, you know, Alice's grandmother wrote, and I really enjoyed those, and I actually liked them more than the book itself. I didn't like Alice as a character. She just really annoyed me and was rude and angry for not any real reason, and she was just kind of like an a-hole. And also, race is not dealt with great in this book. So it is mentioned in passing that Ellery Finch, who goes on the adventure with Alice, is biracial and Jewish, and it's brought up so quickly and like in passing, like just as someone would say like I'm hungry and then it's like over. Like she did not explore the fact that Ellery is, you know, biracial and Jewish like at all. And there's a point when Alice and Ellery get into an interaction with a police officer, and Ellery expresses that he's uncomfortable in the situation, and Ellery, you know, is just like, hey, like I'm uncomfortable, like I don't really want to be here. And Alice doesn't really understand why, and she kind of just like dismisses him for being anxious around a police officer, which is really screwed up, and Ellery doesn't like correct her in any way. So I feel like that was like a missed opportunity for her to be like corrected of her ignorance and her bias. So I don't really know. I just don't think race was like handled well in this book, and it wasn't really like explored either. It's like the author just put that in there so like it's a little diverse. So I don't really know. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Like I said, I might do a whole video where I talk about this because I just have a lot to say about it. So like I said, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and I wouldn't say I recommend this. I also wanted to say that this book is weird because it's like a fever dream. I only remember like 10% of what happened in this because it's so forgettable. And I know that's like, I don't like being that person, but man, this book was just so forgettable. I forgot like half of it by the second day after I read this, and I just like, this book felt like a fever dream. I don't really remember anything from it. So I don't know. I was just really disappointed with this one, so. The next book I read in October, and the last book that I read for Spookathon, is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, and I got this as my book of the month in my book of the month YA subscription box. And this is about a girl named Céline Rousseau who kind of flees her life as a dressmaker in Paris and goes to New Orleans to kind of start over and live in this convent with nuns and other girls who are also trying to like make a new start for themselves. And she kind of gets involved with this shady organization called Le Cour des Lions. I don't know if I said that right, but it's like the Court of Lions essentially. And they all have like mysterious things going on about them, and Céline just kind of like gets entangled in them. And so this is basically about vampires in New Orleans. Like, I don't really know what else I can say other than that. There's spicy romance, and I loved this so much. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars because this was so good and I really enjoyed it. Like, the romance was straight up spicy, and I haven't read any vampire books since Twilight was a thing when I was in middle school, so this felt like slipping into a comfortable old shoe because, man, I just love vampires. I think this is the year vampires are gonna come back. I think they're coming back. This was one of my favorite books of the year because Renee Ahdieh's writing style is so beautiful and so like just magical and amazing. And she was like describing food in this book, and it was like making me hungry, and then she was like, oh my gosh, this writing is just so good. And a lot of people say it's flowery, but that doesn't mean it's objectively bad. I really enjoyed the writing style. That's why I have so many quotes tabbed, because her writing style is so pretty. She also writes badass women. Like, there were so many badass women characters. Like, Celine is a badass woman, Odette is a badass woman, and can we talk about the fact that Odette is a gay icon, and I love her and I want to marry her and I have a crush on her. I don't know, I just really enjoyed this book, and I normally don't read anything like this, and that was a challenge for Spookathon, is to read a book that you wouldn't normally read. And I don't normally gravitate towards vampire romances, but this was straight up spicy. I felt guilty when I was reading this because it was so damn good. So I highly recommend this book if you haven't read it, because this is so freaking good. So like I said, 4.5 stars out of 5. This one's so good, highly recommend. So the next book I read in October is Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson, and this follows the story of a girl named Mila whose best friend passes away along with 2 other popular girls in school, And so Mila and her friend who passed away named Riley, they kind of practiced amateur witchcraft together. And then one day this mysterious book shows up and it's like, hey, here's a spell how to bring people back from the dead. And so Mila doesn't really believe that Riley committed suicide, even though that's what everyone's saying. So she wants to try to use witchcraft to bring her back so she can kind of figure out how she died, why she died. When Mila tries to bring back Riley, she also brings back those two popular girls who died in the same week. So she kind of has like these 3 corpses walking around to like babysit. And this book was so great. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Like, this was so refreshing. And I was kind of falling into a reading slump after I read The Beautiful, because I kind of had like a major book hangover. So I decided to read some light and fun, like contemporary urban fantasy type thing. So I picked up Undead Girl Gang and I loved it so much. The banter in this book is just so hilarious, and I was laughing at like every page because of how funny it is. And it also has great representation. The main character, Mila, is a plus-size Latina, so I think that this has wonderful representation, and the friendships were great, and it was so funny, and I loved the story, and there was like a twist, and I don't know, this just had everything I love in a book. So I highly recommend this one if you're looking for something super fun but also kind of spooky. So yeah, I really loved Undead Girl Gang. Like I said, 5 out of 5, I highly recommend it. So the second to last book I read in October is The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw, and I wanted to pick this one up because Shea Earnshaw's next book, The Winterwood, is coming out, so I wanted to read this one first to see if I liked her writing, to see if I would want to get The Winterwood. I know that doesn't really make any sense, but that's just kind of how I do it. If I see an author who like everyone really likes is coming out with something and I haven't read their previous work, I'm like, okay, let me read their previous work first before the new thing comes out so that I can read the new thing when it comes out. I know that doesn't really make any sense, but here we are. So anyway, The Wicked Deep is about a town called Sparrow in Oregon. In 1822, these 3 girls who lived in Sparrow were accused of witchcraft, and they had stones tied to their ankles and they were tossed to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Ever since these girls were killed, they come back every summer and inhabit the body of 3 random girls. And they get revenge by luring boys into the water and murdering them, and this has happened every summer since 1822 when they first were murdered. So it kind of follows the story of a girl named Penny Talbot who kind of tries to break the curse along with a mysterious outsider named Beau. And I loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because this was just so amazing in every way. This book was just like my exact cup of tea. It had everything I love in a book. It had magic and witches and revenge and friendship and romance and a little bit of, albeit fictional, history. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed this book, and it was so atmospheric. Like, it takes place in this little fictional seaside town in Sparrow, Oregon, and you just really felt like you were there, breathing in the salty air and the rain, and man, this was just so beautiful and atmospheric, and I loved it so much, and the story is so interesting, and I just love this book with all my heart. So this was definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. And it was really unexpected. Like, I was expecting to give this a 3 because this doesn't have like amazing ratings from people who I follow on Goodreads and like who I have as friends on Goodreads. So I was like, I don't know if this is gonna be good. I feel like I might give this a 3, but after reading it, solid 5 out of 5. I love this book so much, and I definitely want to pre-order The Winterwood or just like go buy it because man, I really want to read more from this author. I love it so much. So I'm sorry if I got too excited there, but yes, The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw gets a 5 out of 5 from me. I'm actually going to like buy my own copy of the book for me to have on my shelf because this is from the library, so I'm definitely gonna like buy my own copy because this is one of my favorite reads of the year. So I definitely recommend you go read The Wicked Deep. So finally, the last book I read in October is Baldur's Bones by Mary Arrogant, and this is a really short middle grade book. I have no idea where this book came from, I'm gonna be honest. It was just on my little sister's bookshelf and it looked spooky and it sounded spooky, so I was like, okay, spooky, 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 give me spooky. So yeah, I decided to read it, and it's basically about a boy named Finn who is recently orphaned. he's like really sad, obviously, because he just got orphaned, and he moves in with some relatives in the Irish countryside, and he meets a girl named Tara, and they go on this adventure to this Viking burial ground where she likes to spend her time. And Finn is like, this is weird, why are we on a burial ground? And then they find a skull that actually belonged to a Viking, and he keeps the skull because the Viking has an overbite like he does, so he's like, hey, we brothers, we vibin'. So he takes the skull and basically gets haunted until he helps this Viking man, spirit, ghost, have a proper burial. So he helps out this Viking man. I described that really poorly, but basically I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars because it was good, but it wasn't like great, and it wasn't like horrible, so it was kind of like eh. So I was like, okay, 3 stars. So I really enjoyed how this had kind of like a Goosebumps vibe to it. Like, I don't know, I really enjoy like short, like middle grade horror stories. I don't really know, like scary stories to tell in the dark was my jam back then. So I don't know, I just really enjoyed this because it had a Goosebumps vibe to it. I don't know, I just kind of like, I don't know. This was really fast paced and light and fun, and I think that it was a good book to like squeeze into the end of the month as like a, you know, just so I can have another book for my reading challenge for Goodreads, you know. There's like these points in the book where Finn is like kind of like talking to his mom one-sidedly in his head because, you know, his mom like recently passed away, and it was really sweet at first, and I was like, oh, you're so cute, like talking to your mom and like your head being like, I'm doing this for you, mom. But then it started to get kind of creepy because he was doing it like all the time, and he was like, see, mom, I did it for you. And it just got a little creepy, and it wasn't intended to be creepy in the book, but it was just creepy, and I didn't like it. And I was like, Finn, why are you talking to your mother in your brain, and you're going crazy? I also kind of found Tara annoying. Like, she was like, she seems like the type of girl who would like try to dismantle the patriarchy, so I kind of like her for that. But she was also kind of like annoying at the same time, and like didn't really know when to like shut her mouth. So yeah, I don't know. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. It wasn't amazing, wasn't bad. 3 out of 5, you know. So that concludes my October wrap-up video. I read a total of 16 books, and I read a total of 5,012 pages total, which is crazy. And I did all the math, and I even accounted for the one book that I DNF'd, and I counted like how many pages of that I read exactly before I DNF'd it. So I like statistics and I like facts, so sorry. But anyway, 5,012 pages I think is a pretty good amount, and I really enjoyed these books. I had a really good reading month. I had a lot of 4s and 5s going on, so I think I had a pretty good reading month. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like, subscribe down below, and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss a single upload, and have a great day. Bye!